Hey, this is Tiger. Welcome to my stream. Hey AJ, a good evening to you. And CD Raider, has anyone seen the couch cushions? He has not found his couch cushions yet. For the third week in a row. I asked Kara, but she is denying everything. No couch cushions on this end, I'm afraid. Welcome back to the West Coast, the main line, Preston, Carlisle. This time I actually am live, and I am mean to be live. So a good thing to turn on the DLC marker and the disclaimer that I got this DLC for free as being an ambassador, so still everything that I'm telling you about it, and I really love this DLC by JustTrains, is still my unfiltered opinion. AJ says, isn't it great to know your life? Yes, it's really great. So maybe we will have all the friends helping in the progress, and I can actually talk to him and them, all the friends I mean. So I turned off the music, as you might be aware. So well, Theodoros, hello Tiger and all, so great to have you back on the stream, and you made it, even though the time is still not the best for you, as I am totally aware of. What I'm going to do today is to talk about this locomotive, the British Rail Class 87, and it is the first electric British locomotive that we have in Trainsim world, and it is really a nice piece of work by JustTrains, and you can see how many different liveries you get from the Preston Carlisle route. And its predecessor, the 86, is supposed to be released soonish. If they ever told me when it is supposed to be released, I forgot it, so it's really safe so that I cannot leak anything, but it is on the roadmap that it is supposed to be not leaked, but released quite soon. And then you can see what is the difference between the 86 and the 87. And the 87 is already a really nice locomotive. I wanted to play this service. Lofty, hey Tiger, he says, hey to you, sorry that I didn't talk to you the other day, but it was not meant to be a live stream. Something went wrong in my OBS. Maybe I pushed the wrong button, and so you couldn't tell me how those things were actually pronounced properly. So I kicked myself out again for whatever reason. I'm taking this weathered version in the 1458. Already played it this afternoon. I'm not taking dynamic weather today because I don't want it to rain. It did not rain the other day, but still no experiments today. Rated for almost 1.5 hours, so a nice long service. Obviously we are driving this thing. Inspector, hey to you, nice to have you here. So what was I meaning to do? Turn on the music again. At the moment my PC does not want to show me that menu again. Doesn't work. Well, we have to wait. Maybe it works again after this service has loaded in properly. Here is rain time. Now we switched it off today. Did you notice we added moderators on Discord? Says AJ, is that so? Oh, I see. Yeah, AJ did that, told me how to do that the other day, and now I finally am able to turn on the sound again. And here we are at Carlisle in Cumberland, and we're going south to Preston in Lancashire. Okay, starting our locomotive, turning it on, opening the door, actually telling the guard to open the door, and then we have to test a bit. Fire alarm works. AWS, cap, change, switch over, self-test, go into the engine room, crouch down, don't forget, set the DVD DSD switch in this beautifully recreated engine room, and we can crouch up again. Signal is still red. What do we have to do? Turn on the headlights, the marker lights, maybe even the instrument lights, and then loco brake, reduce train brake to first application so that we can release it properly, and still don't roll away as long as we have passengers. Can never hurt to overload, to reset the overload relay, and then let's get this number 3 camera at the end of our train, and the other one at the front. Preston Carlisle aspects is nice. Yeah, it is really a beautiful DLC. Oh, see which one we have. We have the Royal Scot. That is the 87001, the first locomotive in this series. Still can't close the doors because the light is still red. And Vanguard, or may I call you Juniper still? I don't know. At least I am very happy to have you here. Green, we can close the doors. This beep beep is actually the guard telling us that we can go. Master switch, brakes to running. And we are going with our electric locomotive. We're limited to 20 when we are leaving Carlisle here. And Vanguard, such a great way to end the weekend and have a nice Sunday evening. Thank you so much, and lovely. It's probably a bit spoilers, but what's the stream plan for the future, Tiger? Well, I have a couple of ideas circling around the Expert 101, and then I am obviously going into those unboxing streams when we have new releases. And a couple of more loose ideas, but I'm not planning too much in the future, and I'm taking it from wherever we get. See the radar, have you looked at some of the city rapid train transit sims? Yeah, the tram sim I own, and I have looked at it. I actually quite liked it, but not so really heavily. Not so really. Still have to get into maybe. Vanguard, you can call me whatever you want, but I wanted to make my name the same on all platforms. Easy, Inspector. Is the 87 very driven to drive with a tap changer? I own this route, but so far only drove the 47 and Pacer on it. Yeah, very much so. Especially since, from what we can see here, the neutral sections are actually simulated here. Here is a neutral section. The yellow beacons that are actually switching off, you can see it here on the ammeters, automatically, ping, it was switched off, and then switching them on again, but we have to get our power controller to off and have to wait until the notches are down to 0 before we can apply power again. So the driving is completely different with the tap changer. It is more closely related to driving the 110 and the 111 in Germany, being a tap changer locomotive, not with the Z-Steuerung. It's a bit different from that because we have more notches. We have a field weakening step at the end, but we will get to this in the presentation. And we have more juice in the overhead catenary. We are running with 25 kV here, as compared to 15 kV in Germany. And driving the 47, in my opinion, is completely different. And I think the 87 is really beautifully implemented and simulated with the engine room. I love, for example, how the headlight turns off in the neutral section and on again. It is very bouncy, yeah, but this is a bit because my cab movement settings are always high, because I like this bouncy movement. Oh, CD radar, then I got you wrong. And Juniper, it does not take that many hours, but depending on the presentation, I would say between 1 and 3 to 4 hours. Lofty, are you sure you aren't driving a secret electric pacer prototype? An electric pacer. So, this building to the left with this copper-colored bridge warns me that we are closing in on a drop from 90 to 85. We should pass a motorway on an overpass, and at this point I should have my tap changer run down. Did you see the motorway? Because now we will get into an 85 reduction. Hopefully I did not misremember that. When it is turning to the right, then that it should be. Yes. Those speed signs are sometimes really hard to spot. Sometimes they are strategically put in a weird spot so that you don't really see them. I really love those buildings that are line side here. Soon enough we should get a 90, and then even a 110. Not a 90 here, you can see it a 100. It's really hard to see, right? Sometimes. Here the 100. Flops into field weakening. So now we are running full power. This beep 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 is the DVD. You have to hit your, or you have to let go and repress your pedal. How can we make speed signs? Here is the 110, by the way. Less visible. Ah, I got an idea, Bob. Let's just use some thin wire without a background. Well, at some point in time they figured that this is okay if you have all the time in the world to see the sign because you're approaching with 35 miles. But if you're running your line with 110, they are really sometimes a bit hard. This 20 was only for the ground frame, for the crossover. Yeah, Spectre, if you like the 111, then you should like this. It does not have a thyristor tap changer, unlike the 111. But an, older version with actually moving runners or rollers. No solid state equipment. But apart from this switching with the tap changer is quite as with the 111. The same thing, if you switch to off by mistake, then you have to wait for the tap changer to run down before you can apply power again. And the scenery, I cannot stress this enough, is super beautiful, with a lot of sights to see. And I really fell in love with this DLC because of its scenery. So maybe we already went from Cumberland to Westmoreland and Furness. At least Pernith is in Westmoreland and Furness. Two parts, administrative areas in Cumbria. Cumberland in the north and Westmoreland and Furness in the south. Theodoros, isn't British drivers supposed to know the route they're working on? Like, there's no able, route knowledge is everything. They are route knowledge, but why make it so hard to keep them on their toes, maybe? And I have to admit, I kinda like it. Plumpton, I think, is the name of this passing loop. Or at least something like this. So no stranger could hijack the train and operate it safely. Well, yeah, that is a good safety precaution in case of someone hijacking the train. They will derail soon. Don't know if that is the greatest of ideas. So we're getting closer to Pernith. 3.5 miles. Still in a uphill part here a bit. I think 2 miles out we can start slowing down. We have to slow down to 80 before we get into the station, so that is not really a thing if we have to stop. Yes, he is joking. Good thing. I kind of wonder if the point is that the driver should be focused on the track ahead instead of looking at the screen. Maybe. And if the abuela system is based on tops, then it will be hard to read anyway. So now we have to slow down. We have dynamic brakes on this locomotive. A funny version of dynamic brakes, rheostatic brakes that only work if we have a connection to the overhead catenary. So rheostatic brakes, but they don't work in neutral sections because the current for the field that is exciting the engine comes from the overhead catenary. So even though it is rheostatic braking, we need active current for it to work. Hey Bernie, nice to see you. Hope you are back safe and sound after CD Radar took you through Prague. Pernith station. And we're only a little late. So, if you don't want your DSD to annoy you all the time, we've got to set it to neutral. And then Pernith station with Pernith Castle over there. Cornflakes advertisement. Look at this area here. And here is the golf bag that you were missing, CD Radar. So there is a driver's reminder application. Who builds his castle so close to the railway? And Bernie says the Radar Express was truly awesome. Yeah, I will have to experience that too. And Dovetail a lot who enjoys trains. Well, they did not see that coming, I should say, when they built their castle, and soon it was broken. Yeah, so getting the presentation ready and switching it on. Here we go. Excuse me, the CD Radar. Yes, the CD Radar Express. Nobody's talking about it. Okay, you remember when we talked about the tap changer in the German classic E10 or now Baureihe 110 locomotive? How we got the juice into the train and into our driving motors. That was the thing that we have obviously pantographs on our roof, and we have the Fahrrad, the overhead catenary, where the juice comes from, and then we have a cable into our train connected with a main circuit breaker, typically on the roof, because there is a heavy switch. Then we have a transformer, the main transformer, where we can step down the voltage that is coming in over the roof and send it into our driving motors. That is the idea with the transformer. We're getting a high voltage, lowish current from the overhead catenary, because we have to cover so big distances that we would lose a lot of the energy if the voltage wasn't that high. But we cannot throw this big voltage in our driving motors or have it run through our locomotives, because we want to fry neither the driving motor nor the driver or anyone else. So the traction motors typically sitting on the axles, 4 or 6 depending on how many driven axles we have. So if we extend the pantograph, we close or almost close a circuit current, or the voltage at this point is coming into the train. If we close the main circuit breaker, then we actually close a current or a circuit, an electric circuit that comes from the substation along in the overhead catenary, is picked up by the pantograph, wired into the train, into the transformer, and then through brushes on the axles back into the steel rail, and on the steel rail back to the substation. So this is a closed electric circuit, and this can flow. As long as we don't take anything out of the transformer acts as a really big resistor, so that there is not a big current running. In Germany it was like 15 kV with one phase AC. Unlike on the Vectron with our 3-phase AC, this is a classic 1-phase alternating current, like a sine wave. Not 3 sine waves, but like 1. And on the German locomotive, we had also 1-phase AC driving motors like Reihenschlussmotoren, commutator motors, but they are able to process alternating current, and each of them took about 500 volts. So we had to step it down. And how did we do that? With our transformer, so that we can gradually increase the voltage that we throw in our driving motors, so that we can start our train and then get to full throttle at some point, so that we can actually control the power that our driving motors are putting onto the axle by manipulating the voltage. Closed circuit versus open circuit, says Lufty. Alright. Why is the good position of the main circuit breaker called closed? Why good? I don't know. We have to look at this in a different context maybe. So, but how can we do that? Our transformer can step down the voltage, but we don't want him to do this in a fixed rate, and this is what we need the tap changer for. So at one point, be it on the secondary or on the primary winding in our transformer, we have a contraption that only picks up part of this coil, either at 0, it doesn't pick up anything, or it goes down all the way to pick up more, and all of it. So this coil in the middle is the switchable one, and it picks up between 0 and 100% of the coil that is fed with the voltage that is coming through the roof, right? And 28 steps we had on the German locomotive, and we at this point we just thought, okay, we can do this switching here, and this is what the tap changer, the Fahrstufenschaltwerk, does. But we did not look into how actually this is done with the switching here. And Juniper says, do we still apply electricity to the rail nowadays, and does it make sense for a locomotive to raise both pantographs while stationary? Yes, we do this, Lofty, and yes, during winter while stationary, to scrape off the ice in winter, it makes sense. If there is another idea when to have both pantographs raised while stationary, depends. It is always very dangerous to put up both pantographs if you are somewhere close to neutral sections or something where you can actually bridge two sections of the overhead catenary with your two pantographs and your locomotive. That needs to be done very cautiously. Back here, so the idea is to only take part of this winding here and put it in our primary coil, and so we can actually control how much of the voltage provided by the overhead catenary we are throwing at our driving motors. And so we can not only step down the voltage, but we can do this gradually. This was the German one. And the 87 works according to more or less the same principle. What the Germans can do, the British can do as well, or even better. Same thing here, but we have a bigger voltage, 25k, what we also know from from New England, for example, Boston, Providence. Also here we have 25k volts, and again one phase AC coming in through the roof, through a main circuit breaker, going into the main transformer, and then with a tap changer we provide the current that is picked up by the secondary winding and is fed into our driving motors. Juniper, I've seen locomotives doing it while standing at stations, Vectron, but also older. Maybe this is a thing, yeah. And sometimes they have this startup program where they put up both and then they just decide in which direction they are going, and then they are lowering one again. This also protects the trolley against burning out during higher current consumptions, as radar, for example, during heating. Okay. Also a nice idea. So it depends on your machine, I think, whether it makes sense or not to have both pantographs up. As long as you're stationary, you don't have the problem with ripping it off. And Lofty says icy wires can produce enough resistance that the wire and pantograph heat up and weld together, taking the wires with the train as it departs. With two pantographs, less current goes through each panto and the chance of welding disappears. Alright, so you can actually split the current between the two pantographs so that you can switch them parallel and halve the current, not the voltage. Alright, so what can we see in our cap from that? What is happening here on the 87? We have 1 volt voltage indicator that shows us the voltage that is happening in this dark blue line, so in the tapped one, so that we can see at what point our tap changer is sitting at the moment. So the loco does not give us a number, we are in notch so and so, but it gives us more or less from 0 to 100% in what range we are according to the voltage that is happening here. Same time, they call it the notch indicator, and those are the 4 indicators that we can see in our cap. We have seen it already. The red, amber, green ones are those are not the notch indicators, but the black one with the white scale is the notch indicator. So it starts with 0 and this thing moves up gradually, and you will see that it does not go up in a smooth way, but it is going up in steps. Click, 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 and you can listen to the switching noises that are happening behind you in the engine room, and it goes up to 100, and then with the last notch into the weak field we will see what this actually is, because this is something that we don't have on the German classic ones, at least on the 110 and the 111. I have not seen it, that something like this happens. The driving motors on the British locomotives like the 87, they take a bit more voltage than the German ones. From what I have been able to find out, 700 volts continuously and 1.3 kilovolts peak, compared to 500 volts that the German driving motors take. So we can throw a bit more voltage on them. And yeah, the amperage that is actually happening in this circuit here, that is fed into the driving motors, that appears here on those red, amber, green indicators. We have 2 indicators because we have 2 groups of driving motors, 4 driving motors, and you have 1 indicator, 1 traction amperage indicator for each bogie. So driving motor 1 and 2 and driving motor 3 and 4. So if everything is happening as is supposed to, then you will have them more or less moving. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16 17 18 19 20 21 22 23 24 25 26 27 28 29 30 31 32 33 34 35 36 37 38 39 40 41 42 43 44 45 46 47 48 49 50 51 52 53 54 55 56 57 58 59 60 61 62 63 64 65 66 67 68 69 70 71 72 73 74 75 76 77 78 79 80 81 82 83 84 85 86 87 88 89 90 91 92 93 94 95 96 97 98 99 100 101 102 103 104 105 106 107 108 109 110 111 112 113 114 115 116 117 118 119 120 121 122 123 124 125 126 127 128 129 130 131 132 133 134 135 136 137 138 139 140 141 142 143 144 145 146 147 148 149 150 151 152 153 154 155 at the same speed, and if you're getting wheel slips and the wheel slip protection is cutting in, then you can see those needles jump about in a weird way. So actually those indicators are two indicators, because left and right you have a different needle, and you can see what your driving motors are doing here. And the rightmost one is the notch indicator for the second locomotive if you are running double-headed. So typically you only see something happening on the left notch indicator, but if you're actually coupling up two 87s and it's some time of what is it in English, die Zeitmultiplexe Doppeltraktionssteuerung. I had a word, but I forgot it, so there actually is a special protocol for this multi-unit working, that it is multiplexed on a cable and multiplexed in a form that it is divided into a certain pattern time-wise. And so you can have multiple 87s working together, and then you can see on the firstmost one, you can see what the second one is doing on this second notch indicator. Works. I have tried it out. It works perfectly in the game. So first locomotive, second locomotive. And now, ladies and gentlemen, this is an original diagram that I took from driver's manual that forum member was kind enough to share on the Dovetail Games forum. It is a British rail document, driver's manual for all the AC electric locomotives 81 through 87, and there you can find this diagram number 13, time division multiplexing. Thanks Lofty for this word. At least I was able to explain it in a way that you can give me the word for it. Yeah, time division multiplexing as opposed to frequency division multiplexing, then for multi-unit control. So this is an original diagram, and it shows us what is happening here. So you can see the overhead line here, you can see the pantograph. The thing that is called ABB is our main circuit breaker, air blast breaker code, because this is a switch where you use pressurized air to blow out any arc that happens when opening the circuit and opening the switch, and the current still wants to go on, ionizes the air, and so we have to blow it out with pressurized air. So this is actually the same thing here with a light blue color coming in from the overhead catenary pantograph main circuit breaker, and then here into the leftmost winding of this transformer called the auto-regulating winding. And this is the main winding where everything else is picked up. You can see on the left side there are those secondary installments, like the energy that you take out of this transformer for the train heating or for other appliances. Heizstrom on the German locomotives, and we have something here as well, even more of them for a secondary thingy. So that is the light blue contraption here, and you can see these arrows here are our taps, and it starts from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, then they have left them out, and then 36, 37, 38. So you can see that this machine goes up to 38. Our main circuit breaker, I took a picture of it. It is on the roof, and it has two parts. One is like this thing where you can use the air blast that is in a tube, more or less, where you open up first the circuit, and then you have the arcing in this tube and use the pressurized air to blow it out, and then you would open this bigger thing so that you have a really big gap in your circuit. Unfortunately, from what I've seen, it is not animated on the 87, unlike on the 111 in the German locomotives. The 110, it is not animated either. This one here stays closed from what I can see so far. So that would be then the dark blue current. We are picking up parts of this auto-regulating winding, and the more this roller rolls up to 38, the more current we are actually taking out of, well, the more voltage, let's be correct here, the more voltage we are picking out of this auto-regulating winding and are offering for our secondary windings to be put into our traction motors from 0 to 38. 38, so that you can see it better. And then the pink circuit would be that. I have it only for one driving motor here in the diagram to the right, and on the left we have actually all four of them. You can see that two of them are connected and grounded together, and yeah, I have the pink current only in one of the four, but it happens on all four of them, so it is picking up here. So primary winding, secondary winding, here is the stepping down of the voltage, and from the light blue to the dark blue we select how much of the voltage we will actually want to offer. And if it is at 0, then this whole contraption works as a big resistor, and we have almost no current going through our locomotive, only a very a trickle of current more or less going through. We have, unlike the German locomotives, DC traction motors, so direct current, no alternating one phase alternating current, but direct current here. And this is why we need to rectify our current. We are getting AC current through the roof, and at this point here we are sending it, and here we actually have a solid state element thing with diodes that rectify the alternating current into direct current. Also those things here, C1 to C4, that are called smoothing chokes. They take this rippling out that remains after sending it through those solid state rectifiers here. And 20k Tiger Paws says, Lofty, alright, congratulations. We will see what you are doing with it. Then you have some switches here, motor contactors and secondary circuit line breakers, so that you can interrupt this circuit if necessary, and different appliances can do that here. And then an interesting fact that we did not see on the German locomotives, if you look at the notch indicator, you can see the scale from 0 to 100, and there is the weak field on top of it. So that even after we took everything out of the auto-regulating winding, we have still one notch more that we can offer our driving motor CD radius. Isn't the current flowing through that diode in the wrong direction? Maybe. But I think it is actually switching all the time, because we are getting alternating current in, and this diamond shape diode arrangement typically works in a way that the current is always switched back and forth, and in the end you have an output of a direct current. But for that you probably have to discuss this with a person who has a degree in electrical engineering. And the diamond is a full bridge rectifier, says Lofty. I see. Yeah, I've read this before. And Raider says, okay, that's fair. I have no idea how that component works. At any rate, for what we can, at least people with my knowledge about electrical engineering parts and stuff, is that we can rectify one-phase AC current into DC current for our traction motors here by this diode contraption with the smoothing chokes afterwards. Yeah, and back to our weak field. What is that now? We are at notch 38, and we have still something to put on top to go even faster, to go into weak field. That is more or less tap 39 field weakening. The forerunners for the 87, some of them had even two field weakening steps, so tap 39 and tap 40. We talked about this when we talked about the British Rail Class 313. Let's see how a commutator motor works. We have a current here, the light blue one. It is running through a conductor, and that creates in a certain area a magnetic field, an electromagnetic field around it. If we coil it up, then we can intensify this magnetic field. If we put a metal anchor in the middle, then we can amplify it even more and order it. If we put some other metal parts around that create a different magnetic field, then this whole thing can turn. So in a series wound DC commutator motor, we would have the cable running first along the rotating part, the rotor, and then also through the stator to create the field. So we have two parts creating magnetic fields, and they typically tend to align themselves in a proper position. And if we put the rotating part on a pin where it can rotate, then this thing rotates. And yeah, the problem is if it is rotating faster, then the rotating part with the current inside will create a force that counteracts this rotating force. We will create a back EMF, a back electromagnetic force, that at some points stops the rotor from rotating even faster. If I can explain it like this without going too much out of my depths. I am totally out of my depths every time I'm talking about this electric and electronic stuff, but nevertheless I will try to do it as far as I can understand this stuff, and then maybe I think everyone can understand this without being a technical person and having a degree in electric and electronic engineering. So how can we counter this counter EMF? We can weaken the field around it. Then the back EMF is also weaker, and then we can go to a higher speed. And how is this accomplished? We can switch a resistor in parallel with our stator. Then the electromagnetic field that is created by this stator part is weaker. We have less torque then in the turning, but it can turn faster. And if our vehicle is already running rather fast, countering the counter EMF is what counts the spectre. Yes, guys, this is the way that I actually try to get my head around those thingies. But the idea is to weaken the field, lessen the torque, and increase the speed. And this can be done when our vehicle is already running fast. Then we need less torque but higher speed, and then we can go beyond this point where the counter EMF would prevent our rotor from rotating even faster, and then we can go faster. And this is why the manual here calls this a field divert, because we are diverting some of the current through a resistor that needs to be of a magnitude that still lets some current through the resistor and some through the field, otherwise it wouldn't work. Otherwise either we would have no effect or no electromagnetic field anymore at all. And CD says the fact that you are not an expert in this field is an advantage in this case, because you can explain it perfectly for ordinary non-technical people. I'm very happy that you say that, because I never know if anyone actually understands what I'm doing here. But I am so enchanted by all this technology that there is, that I always try to share what I think I have understood from what's happening here. So this is what we have here, what we can see in our cap, what the locomotive is doing. 38 notches on the tap changer, 4 traction motors that want DC current, so we send them through a rectifier. And then we have on top of everything 1 notch of field weakening, where we weaken the field in the traction motors so that they can run faster with less torque. Is there anything else that we can talk about? Yes, the heart piece or the centerpiece of everything this switching device, how it is actually done, that we can switch around without our locomotive moving like a bunny, and on the other hand without shortcutting and burning everything in our electric wiring and so on. And that's the point where the German locomotives that we have discussed are different, because they use solid state elements, thyristors, semi-conductor switches without any moving parts to do this switching. And the switching is done with very high voltages, reasonably high currents, and if you create a shortcut here, you can perfectly well fry everything or set your locomotive on fire, even if it is happening in the wrong context. So let's look at this part here that is with TC and TR, and our switching part here with actually moving parts that are running along the different taps of our auto-regulating winding. The TC stands for tapping contactors, so that is more or less switches that can be opened and closed, and the TR stands for a tapping resistor. So this jagged line here is typically a resistor. So this the wavy line is the winding, is the coil, and the jagged line is a resistor, and this thing here symbolizes a switch. And here it goes to the primary winding, and I want to look especially on these switching parts here that are not solid state elements, no thyristors, but really moving rollers and parts like switches with metal thingies moving about. For that we can even increase it a bit more and look at it. This is our contact here. This is our cable connected with some metal part that rolls along those taps and goes from tap whatever this might be, from tap 6 to tap 7 and downward again. So what is the problem if we just switch it like this? There will be a phase where our contactor loses the connection to tap 6, then it is in the void before it reaches tap 7, and that is annoying for our locomotive, because in the meantime, in this interval, we don't have any juice on our driving motors, and that results in a movement that goes like so we will have jerks all the time because the locomotive is applying power, not applying power, and this is not only annoying for everyone on board, but it can also, if you hit a certain frequency, break the couplers rather easily. So this is unacceptable. You cannot really run it like this unless you have really low forces. And clip Tiger Way's best moments. That's Juniper. Okay. Okay, what can we do? Why don't we use a contact at the end that is so big that it is always touching at least one contact? Then we don't have this Schubkraft oder Zugkraftunterbrechung. We are not going into this interval where we don't have any juice on our motors. We always have juice. So at one point it is touching tap 6, then it moves, then it touches 6 and 7, and then it moves on, and then it touches only 7 again. Well, works in that, well, in this context well, but the problem is we are creating a shortcut here. We are short circuiting here 2 taps, and that creates a current between the 2 taps that has the magnitude in voltage of the difference between the 2 taps. And that is not good because they can fry our equipment again. So doesn't work either. What do? We can install a second roller that we connect at some part, maybe at the driving motor or wherever, so that we have 2 legs to stand on, more or less. And as long as the one is moving to the next tap, we still have the contact on the second leg, and after that it can go back to the next controller, to the next roller, and then they are both on the same tap again. Again, no interruption in our traction force, But the problem obviously is we are again short-circuiting everything. So we have again a short circuit current running here that can break our machinery. So both things is out of context. Well, again, the problem between short circuiting the whole thing and on the other hand interrupting the traction force. So how can we save this and how can we make this work? So one thing what you can find in an explanation is to install switches in both circuits connected with both runners that can switch between a direct way and a way that has a resistor in it, and this on both ends. So the red one and the black one can switch between a connection without a resistor and on the other hand a connection with a resistor. And you can see here the resistor is on the right and here the resistor is on the left. Why is that nice? Because if we coordinate those two switches, then we can switch them in a way that there is always one of those rollers connected with a direct way and one of those rollers connected with a resistor. So if we have this and both rollers are at the same tap, one of them is with a direct way and the other one with a resistor, then the current would go the easiest way, the way of the path of least resistance, and go through the black roller, not through the red one. And at the same time, this resistance here in the red circuit is preventing the short circuit from happening. And if we want to move that whole contraption, then we switch. Now the black one has the resistor in it and the red one is on the path without any resistance, and then the current would divert to this side. And then, like with martial arts, before you move your legs, you shift your weight on the other leg, and then we can move the black leg, the black contactor here. Then we have to bring the red leg, the second roller, back to this tap, and for that we switch again. The current goes back to the black tap, and then we can move the red one safely. And Theodore says, I'm truly lost at this point. I'm so sorry, but maybe I'm just making no sense at all, but this is how I understood this technology here at this point. And Vanguard must be some pretty hefty resistor then, or otherwise the high taps would still short circuit. It is a pretty hefty resistor. I think, I don't know what the English word for it is. In German, I think they call it an Überschaltwiderstand. It's a Lastschakler, a Lastschalter, and the other one is for the switching. Yeah. And this makes this concept here makes our whole tap changing thingy an on-load tap changer, because we can change the taps while the load is on the whole system, as compared to an off-load tap changer where we would just stop the current from flowing and then change the tap. And this is obviously something that we don't need on our locomotive, because we need continuous power so that we don't have all those jerks in our train. And it is done on the high voltage side. You can see the switching is happening here where we have high voltage before it is then stepped down through the transformer into the low voltage side on the driving motors. We could do the switching also on the secondary side. First step it down from primary to secondary and then do the switching there. So we would have a lower voltage to switch. But what is the problem with that? We have a lower voltage now, but with stepping down the voltage, we are increasing our amperage, our current. And that is what is sometimes the more destructive problem. You know, as you can really withstand high voltages, like the bird sitting on the high voltage cable, as long as the bird is not grounded, there is no current running through this bird. As soon as it is grounded, then the bird is evaporated. And it's the same thing here with switching the higher voltages. We have lower currents, and if we're doing the switching on the low voltage side, then we would have to switch higher currents. What is typically with more powerful locomotives not the thing that we want to do. With the I think the 81, 83 and 85 are using low voltage side switchings, whereas the 82, 84, 86 and 87 are switching on the high voltage side. So can make sense for some appliances, but typically with the higher developed locomotives we are switching on the high voltage side and not on the low voltage side. See, the razor is, and now I'll add that this whole thing is actually circular. It's actually circular. I don't go into this now. Anyway, another thing, what we have to do every time we're moving our roller away from one tap, we have the problem that the high currents that are running in this system could lead to arcing if this would happen in the air, right? Because then the air gets ionized and the current does not want to stop and runs through the air, through the ionized air. And for that, we are drowning this in a pot of oil. So we're immersing this whole thing in oil. So this is why we have I guess it rotates to change taps. Yeah, there are things there are actually machines to circulate to change taps, but not necessarily. Some do it with camshafts that do all the switching here, and also that is a circular machine, right? With camshafts that are responsible for the timing, like in a car engine. To doing this, but this does not change the fact that they actually have to move those rollers along the different taps, be it that it is in a circular array, that the taps are in a circular array, or be it that they are along in a linear path. But the logic is the same. The rollers have to move along the taps to get more voltage out of it. So actually, the diagram that comes from the driver's manual here looks a bit different than what I have drawn here on the right side. It indicates that only one of our two contactors has a resistance in it, while the other one has always a clear path. So this seems to indicate that the 87 is actually using a bit of a simpler solution for that here, not two rollers that have the possibility to switch between resistance and non-resistance, but it looks like it is arranged in a way that typically the current would be picked up by this side that does not have a resistor in it. Here is the switch is closed, here it is open, and as soon as it is supposed to switch, then we would close the switch here so that we are also picking up, or can also pick up energy through the resistor roller. Open this switch here so that there is no more current coming the direct way, and then for the switching period for this interval we are getting the current here through the resistor. Then as soon as this other one has moved, we close the circuit again, and then the current can go through the primary roller again. So you can read about make before break switching. So the roller makes the connection with the new tap before the connection with the old tap is broken, and for that you need a second one with a resistor to hold it, and the resistor here in this circuit would prevent the short circuit or somewhere, and this needs to be timed. How it is done exactly in this 87 I've not been able to read out of this driver's manual. This diagram looks a bit like it is done here without the resistor on both contactors or both rollers, but only on one. That is then only stepping in during the interval that the primary one needs to go to the next step. But you can see how difficult and how complex this whole thing is getting if you don't have solid state semiconductor switches. With semiconductor switches, it gets more complicated on in an electronic way, or on the electronic side, and harder to understand for lay people even. But to actually build it, it is much more complicated with moving parts, because those need to be moved with an air motor or an electric motor or whatever you have. Well, going back from all this technical stuff into something more graspable, our neutral section in the track. We have talked about this before. If we have a neutral section, because we have to separate the grids of two substations, for example, so there is a little part in the overhead catenary where we do not have any juice coming out, and we have signage for it. We have the white one with the black markings, what is the sign that indicates that here is actually the neutral section. It is called a neutral section indication board site. And we have an advanced sign for it, neutral section warning board approach. You can find it here in the RSSB driver's handbook. And what says, Juniper, impressive, you managed to distill that from the rail documents. Yeah, I've watched some videos that explain this Lastschalter, Überschaltwiderstand stuff for German locomotives, and yeah, I tried to find out how it is done on the 87 with this driver manual, and those diagrams are actually quite helpful for that. In our neutral section, you can see it in the track, there are those beacons with their yellow casings, and they are actually doing the switching off for the main circuit breaker automatically for you, and also the switching on again. So for both directions, switch off, switch on. So your main circuit breaker is opened as soon as the train picks up the signal from those beacons. Then the train runs about 100 feet. Then there is the neutral section of about 15 feet in length. And then there is another 40 feet until the next beacon switches on the main circuit breaker again. So this is called the automatic power control. And the track inductor for this APC system is already a bit oldish and is still in use from what I know. It is those signs you can find on the East Coast main line already, but it has not been simulated so far. And from what I can see, the Preston Carlisle is the first one that can simulate that. Those distances seem short for double traction, says Juniper. Yeah, I guess. For double traction it might be a bit short. If the first one turns on again, maybe you will have a delay if you're running double traction, so that you don't turn it off as long as your second pantograph is still in the neutral section or beyond. And in the rules it says the manual power switch off only necessary if told by the signal layer. Typically it is done automatically, but if there is a malfunction, that you can be told to do it on your own. And sometimes, and this is really cool, because sometimes, especially if you run into those neutral sections under load, so without running it down first, then you can trip your overload relay, and then it does not turn on automatically again. So the typical proceeding would be like you're approaching the neutral section, you let your tap changer run down, switch it off before you're passing this white sign, and then after you're past it and your MCB is closed again, you apply power again. But so especially so you don't get stranded in the neutral sections, it is also acceptable to run into the neutral section under load. Then obviously your connection is cut, and then you have to switch it to off to apply power again. And at this moment when your connection is cut, then it can happen that your overload protection relay will trip, and then it does not switch on again automatically, but you have to press this button here, pantograph up, overload reset again. So if you realize that you cannot apply power again, even though you set your power selector to off after a neutral section, then try pressing this button here while you're in the off position, and then you are resetting this overload relay, and then typically you can apply power again. So this is really, really nicely simulated in this DLC. I don't know if JustTrains got enough credit for this little feature, and I'm super excited that they have those simulated neutral sections here. And it is so nice when you're driving at night and you're going into the neutral section, your headlight turns off, whoop, vroom, turns on again. You can hear all this switching, and you can even hear the relay trip if you do it, because then there is a whirring sound that is missing, and as soon as you put the reset button for the overload relay, then this whirring is back. Great. I think that's my presentation for today. Quite complicated stuff, if you ask me. And maybe I was not able to Spectre, what are the sounds again? Well, I should make some shorts like with the whirring sound for different locomotives and what they tell you. Back at Pernith, where they sell the tickets and have those beautiful railway pictures. Can we close our doors? Yes, we can, because we have a green light. City Raiders' tiger sounds are more realistic than the real ones. Well, as long as they don't come and capture me with their microphones. So now we have all the driving to do. Armstrong Powerhouse will soon go back. Says Spectre. So if I'm not mistaken, we can go with 80 out of the station here, yeah. In Lancaster we need to be careful, because there we can go out with 15 only. So for acceleration it is totally okay to go into the amber area. Not really into the red area, but into the amber area it is totally okay. And then for constant power it is better to stay in the green. And now see how our needle switches into weak field. Bloop! It switched into weak field. So around here, here was the sign that allows us to go 100. Next up is Oxenholme. Lake District. But before that we have to get past Shap Summit. Spectre asks if there are not really many trains around. Well, maybe. So, a passing loop. What I really enjoy on this route are the freight trains, where you are sometimes sent into those passing loops, so that trains like the ones that we are on can overtake. Red Bridge. Green Bridge. And if there is another Green Bridge coming, here's a train for you, Spectre. Here's another Green Bridge. And now I let it run down, because there is an 80 up ahead. And we let the train speed coast down to 80. Let's see if this actually works out with my bridges. Or if this was too early or too late. No, it was too late. Here is the 80. I have to adjust my points a bit. Now we have a stretch of 80. Until we get to a really well hidden speed marker that allows us to accelerate to 95 again. See if I can see it this time. Night is coming up ahead. Let's see if I see it this time. The 95 marker. Yeah. Did you spot it? The 95 marker. Here it is. Hidden between this installment and the thing for the overhead catenary. So this is, in my opinion, really hard to see. Maybe it would be better to move it a bit to the front. So train is surely passed. Passing loop. Now we're getting closer to the summit. Theodorus, could the scenery in the older routes be upgraded up to this standard? This one looks really good. Yeah, 3 here's to you, Theodorus. If there is a price for scenery, JustTrains should take it. It is a trove of beautiful spots. Now we're getting here through this part where there are rocks on both sides. You can see the smoke of this, whatever it is, cement factory, Hardendale, whatever, in the manual that comes with the DLC. You find all those sites listed. Another train. I have not spotted any services that actually go into the sidings at this factory here. But that means I have to run down to 80 again, because at the summit we are at the 80, no, at 90 limit. It is a 90 limit. Lofty says, what are your thoughts on Train Sim Classic? I have come to the community when Train Sim World 2 was the latest shit. So I have never played a lot of Train Sim World Classic. I have it because I bought a bundle at some point in time, but I have a playtime of 2 or 3 hours of Train Sim World Classic. So I don't know if Train Sim World Classic actually has still a raison d'être. Inspector, you're totally right. JustTrains and Train Sim Germany make great scenery. They make great vehicles. By the way, we are now at the summit and now it is going downhill. I like that they typically represent the engine room. I love it when I can go through the engine room for switching ends. On the Crocodile, they even have the auxiliary compressor with inflating it before you can get up the pantograph. And Lofty says there's a lot of content that Train Sim World Classic has that Train Sim World doesn't. Yes, I can see that. Question is whether it will be moved or introduced, recreated for Train Sim World, one after the other. Also costs a lot. AP and other enhancements. Says Theodorus. Maybe at some point they can just make the train sim classic open source or something like this. Those aren't mandatory and also have been questionable quality of late. Yeah, I can't really have a proper opinion to Train Sim World Classic. I never played it a lot. And I have so much content to deal with in Train Sim World that I almost do not get around to other things. Still haven't played the latest DLC for SimRail, for example, let alone all the subway simulators that there still are. Do you? Ask CD Radar. Oh no, where was I? Where was I too fast? Oh, on my downhill run. It is actually 105, not 110 that I'm... This is why I'm running too fast. Look at that. It's 105. So much content to deal with. Yeah, game-wise I have a lot of content. What I'm running out of a bit, here's a neutral section coming up, is my own content that I can provide. My ideas for what I can explain. But that is a different thing, right? Routes and locomotives I have in abundance. Theodorus says, kinda feels wrong when we're in the UK and haven't seen any rain. Haha. Now we pass Tebay, where I wanted Lofty's opinion on how this town is actually, or village is actually pronounced properly. I slowed down to 100 because the 100 is somewhere here in this path through. Here you can see it. Maybe you were able to see it. And now we're running through Lune Gorge, River Lune to the left, through this beautiful gorge. You can almost let your train coast down here, because we're losing just enough speed so that we make it for the 90 limit and for the 80 limit that we get before we get to the Greyrigg passing loop. It's been a pleasant day in the UK here. Spectre says, love your presentations, but B-reels with a chilled run are also perfectly acceptable. Yeah, that is nice of you to say so. And for that we still have a lot of content. A lot of the older content. There is so much stuff in this game. And this is the thing that I don't really like about the community here, that the latest DLC and the latest loco is only the hype until it is released, and then the hype is already on the next thing that is to be released. Here is the limit to 90. Even though there are so many interesting vehicles and routes that you can look into, that it would be worth remastering. But hey, obviously you have to sell to live and to be able to do all this. So it's a balancing act, I guess. It's been a pleasant day, and Vanguard says, I guess you can just play whatever you want and you're simply running the route. We already learn a lot, just like now you are explaining as you go. So nice to say of you to say so. Oh, here is the 80. We missed it a bit. Well, we did not get docked for it. There was a ground frame emergency crossover, and there was the limit to 80, and now we are running under 80 until we get to the Greyrigg passing loop. And that was the Lune Gorge part, and that is so beautiful. I would like to go there in real life. Unfortunately, I don't have a time machine to get there in the 1980s. Now we actually need a bit of power. Because we are going in a short incline before we get to Greyrigg. Should be here already after this tunnel. And here we should be allowed to go back to... what is it? 85? 85 it is. Now going into the descent again. A presentation on train dispatch procedures, UK TRSTRI. No, I did a video about dispatching the train at the station, but that means more or less the platform and train personnel like the guard. But traffic dispatching I have not touched so far, because that is something that I don't really know a lot about. I have read a bit in the train dispatches handbook, or is a different handbook from the driver's handbook. But that is still a realm that at some point maybe I can go into. Even though, to be fair, this calls for being done in SimRail, because there we can actually dispatch. So, train ready to start and right away. There is a video on the Glossop line where the right away stuff is discussed. This train ready to start. This acronym or abbreviation I was not familiar with. I based it on the part that is in the RSSB driver's handbook, where you have like 14 different protocols depending on whether you have a guard on the train, whether you have a staffed platform, whether you have auto closing doors that you can close from your driver's cab. So at some point we should be allowed to accelerate to 90 again, but I guess this is still a bit till we get there. And then we have to prepare for our stop in Oxenholme. And unfortunately CD for closed doors and RA indicators for right away are not simulated in the game yet, even though this guard thingy is taking more and more. Here is the 90. It's taking more and more place. And you have to love the town names in the UK. Yes, that is true. But you need a guide for pronouncing it. How about SimSig for the UK rail signaling? Yeah. I've looked at the game, I don't own it. But would be a bit of a step away from actually running the trains to simulating the signaling. But I've thought about it already, yes. It's a bit less enjoyable than SimRail dispatching, but yeah. So Oxenholme. Oxenholme has, I think, a 75 limit for the station. And we are stopping on the decline in Oxenholme. That means we need a bit more brakes than usual. Can you hear the whirring of the dynamic brakes going up when you increase the power? So they are linked with the setting for the air brakes. Train is reluctant to slow down here and to actually stop at the end of the platform. Yeah, overshot by 8 yards. That woo sound, yeah, that is for the this whirring sound is really characteristic for those 87 locomotives. Maybe do the dispatching examples in Transport Fevers as Theodoros. I personally never play that game, to be honest. Dispatching examples. So from playing Transport Fever 2, I think that it is more or less an automatic thing happening there. You set up the signals, unless you have mods for it. I never know so much about mods, because that usually leads to me losing everything. Look how nicely those rooms in the stations are sculptured. Yeah. From here you have this branch line to Windermere, where this 101 is going. Unfortunately you cannot go it, because then you get the message that that you're leaving the represented area. Try to go there, it looks great, but I couldn't go there with my pacer the other day. Yeah, I don't know what the signal says, because I overshot my signal. It's green, so that I can close my doors. A right guard. Serious as personally, I like the wee see do sound better. That thick tack blip pop sound, but clack 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 pong pong is nice too. Alright. Wie B gesperrt. Good thing now we actually know what is gesperrt. Here you can see we are actually starting our train into the neutral section. So I think this is one of those situations where it is maybe acceptable to run into the neutral section under load. Or at least build up a bit of momentum before we get to the neutral section. Limit increases to 100 here. And see the reader says, I guess out of context montage could be done just from this video. Let's see where the neutral section comes. You can see it even better at night because this white sight sign here. Also those lines, this line light and the heating light go off and on again in the neutral section. And that is really sweet when you're driving at night. I love the neutral sections, especially at night. They don't only go off and on, but they are dimmed and then they are re-dimmed. And same with the headlights. And we are on our way to Lancaster. Limit is 100. We're still getting to a point where it increases to 110. Oh no, I'm speeding. I should have known. And there is a little bit where we are going too fast. And we are just speeding into it. We are going downhill from here. There is still Carnforth. Then the junction to Morecambe, and then Lancaster. And then we have left Cumbria and entered Lancashire. Thanks for the follow, Martix, by the way. I love it when I can have my train just coast. Let's see. Oh yeah, we missed the part where we can accelerate to 110 because we are already at those lakes. Those lakes are, when you're traveling into the opposite direction, typically the marker for The drop from 110 to 100 incoming. And between Pernith and Lancaster, I think the limits are switching at the same spots for both directions. Closing into Carnforth. And follow-up question for the crowds, the CD radar. Which vehicle do you think has the best sound? My favorite for rails is the Austrian CityJet, the Zero Class 47, and for metro is the Siemens Type V Wagen. Good thing you're asking the crowds and not me. Siemens Zero HC I really like, says Juniper. Spectre Class 47. Class 47, like Ronnie said the other day, a tractor sounding locomotive. Bop, 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 bop. You count as crowd too if you want. Well, the good thing is I did not need to answer, because first, I don't know that many vehicles in real life, and the other one is I always like diversity, so it is always hard to pick favorites. And Theodore says I like the 1016 and the 1116 starting and decelerating sounds. I love all of those sounds. 1116. I also like the 47 for Spectre. I think the idling sound of the 47 sounds like a panting dog. So this is very friendly. Spectre says my dog agrees. Yes. So we're passing Carnforth. Station has a passing through line here. Where there are fences, so nobody can fall in front of the train. Could also ask to US viewers, and you will get all kinds of horn types. Well, I also like the MP36, the baby bullet locomotive, for example. And the GP9. It's always so hard for me to pick favorites. Dong, dong, dong. Yeah, the bell. Ringing the bell. Kling-a-ling. It has a moving ringer, the GP38-2. So. Here is even an orange pacer from Manchester. Approaching another dead section with the approach sign slightly askew. Spectre, speaking of the baby bullet in GP9, I recall DTG was about to include passenger services on the Canadian route, which would be a nice addition in my opinion. Yes, for me too. Hest Bay signalling box to the right and Hest Bay to the right. Here is our piece of the Irish Sea, Morecambe Bay. Oops. And now we're coasting into the junction part. Here's the line going to Morecambe and Hesham. Here was the dead section, by the way. And now we're actually getting signals for the stop at Lancaster. Yeah, the baby bullet in Canada. They got the baby bullet to LA, but not to Canada. So far. Beep. And now one of the greatest views in the game when we're actually running into Lancaster. Just have to be a bit cautious because we're running up to a red signal. This is not an AWS magnet, this is a couple of rails lying in the track. Got to prepare this for the approach. Can already see the Lancaster skyline. Maybe let's use this one. Signal is still red. No. It switched to yellow. By the way, according to the driver's manual, it is totally okay and advisable to hold the train brake to overcharge for 10 to 15 seconds when releasing the brakes. Here, across Carlisle Bridge. The gasworks to the right. Here the River Lune again. Lancaster Castle. Ashton Monument. Well, this is something to celebrate, in my opinion. The scenery is great. Control B coastline. Yes, that was a bit copy pasted, but anyway. Here on the right, the trains that go to Morecambe. Alright, arriving at Lancaster. Now I am a bit slow. This is why it takes forever to go into the parking position. Come on, train. Don't die on me. Nice thing is we have long enough stopping intervals. This is the weathered version of the intercity livery, so that we can depart in time. Lancaster Castle. Should be the Cathedral as well. Don't know where actually, but somewhere it must be. Since the station is named after the cathedral, it can't be far. Red light, I can't close my doors. Now I can. Now it is green. Yes, guard. This guard buzzer sounds a bit meek. And Juniper says, yeah, what a long route. This is not the end. No, we are going to Preston. We know Preston station from the Blackpool branches. And we have still 21 miles to go. Yeah, in different DLCs. The whole DLC is 21 miles long. But no. This is a really long DLC with great scenery. Along like almost 80 miles, I think. So if you talk about overpriced routes, the 40 bucks that you have to pay for this route, at least 40 euros it is. You get quite a big chunk of the West Coast main line. Plus the branch line to Morecambe. So are we out of the 15 already? Yes, we are. Wait, what was it, 10 to drive out here? Well, Lancaster limits are driving me crazy. We will do it in a class 08, yes. And Juniper is going to bed. Theodorus, wow, sorry, I'm tired. See you fellas later. Well, Theodorus, it's much later for you than for us. We know that. So sleep well and see you later. And Juniper, you as well. Yeah, now the part through Lancashire. Kicking the loco to its limits, almost touching the red area. At least we can go 110 here. But I'm afraid you can see that I updated my graphics drivers today, and that some of the shaders need to be recreated. And from what I think I have seen is that as soon as I'm using the second screen for streaming purposes, it also halves the FPS that I usually have. Oh man, it is dark outside, but I am still sweating all over. Some of those joints are quite shaky. And if we can actually go the 110, then we cover those 21 miles in almost no time. There's one more passing loop when we get closer to Preston. Barton and Broome. Broughton, whatever you want to call it. Another dead section coming up. Another train to greet us. Here's the dead section. Eight point 8.7 miles to Preston. And the last stretch. Five miles. Here's the passing loop. And Pernith says, wow, the stream is still going. Yeah, but not for long. Now I let it coast. I literally went eat at the restaurant and came back. This loco sometimes sounds a bit like a plane when you're slowing down. trains never sleeps. I don't know. Unless at depot. Yeah. We can open the Thomas and Friends thing again. Those locos are sleeping at the depot. Why did you do a stream on the Thomas one? I tried to, but then on Epic Game Store the 80th anniversary thing did not work. So I did a stream on the basic one, yes. And I have to admit, after having done this stream, I started watching the original Thomas series from the 80s on YouTube, and they are really cool. Still don't know if it is something that belongs into a railway simulation, but it's definitely really cool watching. So the first seasons I watched so far, season 1, season 2, with model railway trains simulated, narrated by Ringo Starr. And the locos have more character there than they have in what you can see in the game here. St. Walburg. And Pernith says he forgot how creepy it was. And Cedar says, I remember it, we have it dubbed. Well, I have never watched this as a kid or before. In Germany it was never a big thing. Apparently there is a German dubbed version. But obviously I was not interested in the German dubbed version, but in the original version. And there is a UK version and an American version. Well, it's funny because in the original British version, this guy who is called in the American version and what is in the game Sir Topham Hatt is called in the UK version the Fat Controller. And this is so politically not correct, but it sounds so much more genuine. And he always has to make things right if the engines do something wrong. Why did I put it into emergency, you know? Political correctness was not a big thing then, right? Well, on the other hand, the Fat Controller didn't mind. Does Thomas always horns and bells in America? I don't know. Don't think he has a bell. Guys, we made it! And I got some kind of achievement, what is always weird. Well, I've driven better, but on the long run, it was quite nice. Thank you guys for staying with me all the time. Yeah, Czech dubbing also calls him fat. Yeah, the fat controller. He's really cool in those first seasons, and he's always finding a correct and kind solution. Spectre says, cool, thank you for the stream. Thank you guys for staying with me and for all your support, ongoing and in the past. And I hope this was not too confusing and too weird, all those things about the tap changer at the time when we did not have thyristors and Pernith. I still don't under the point of the DLC. No. Well, yeah. You can debate long whether it needs this DLC, but then on the other hand, you don't need to buy it to be happy. If you don't like it, then don't buy it. This is always the general rule, and you're not missing anything if you don't have the Thomas DLCs, because they are not layering onto anything and nothing is depending on it. So it's quite sweet. The original series is much more interesting in my opinion, and it got me to watch those old thingies and those old series, so it unlocked some nice lore that I wasn't aware before, and Dad enters the room. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's just about what they dedicate work hours on. On the other hand, if it generates enough funds to invest them into more serious simulation, I don't know how they make the money, then it is not wasted, right? All right, you always have to try to see the reasonable things. There are much too few in our weird world that we are all living in. Guys, take care, be nice to each other, and let's meet again soon. Bye bye.